from actually Module 1. And for those of you who haven't joined us last week, my name is Alexandra Atalla, and I'm working with UNDP's Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems Community, known as the FACS community. And today's workshop, which is the second module, the second session, is on cultivating an innovation mindset and is part of the Value Shift series. I'm not going to go into the details what was covered last week because Ben will do a recap for us. But just in summary, we've had the opportunity to learn more about the agency, adaptability, and aspirations framework. And today's session will be more practical. So we will be introduced to more tools for mindset shift, and we will be doing several practices and exercises. And before I hand over to Ben, whom I will reintroduce for those who haven't joined us last week, Ben is the founder of the Brain Innovation Project and has been working with UNDP and the food systems team for a couple of years, offering different types of workshops on innovation, resilience, agility, which are derived from neuroscience. And as mentioned as well last week, Ben will be offering one-on-one coaching sessions. So for those of you who are interested, we're dropping as well in the chat box a link where you can sign up. So with this, we will firstly start with a very quick Mentimeter. Alejandra will share the instructions in the chat box, and I will share my screen. So just confirming that you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see it perfectly, Alex. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, you can either join using the QR code or traditionally going to the web page and typing the code that you see on the screen and in the chat box. We will have two questions. The questions are addressed to colleagues who have joined us last week. But because we would like to hear your inputs as we're diving into Module 2 today. So I see that we have 3 colleagues who have joined us. 4, perfect. I will start with the first question. So what is your key learning from Module 1? So if you still remember, I know like everyone is busy and lots of things have happened since last Wednesday, but maybe if you could share one key learning for you from Module 1, maybe something related to the agency, adaptability, and aspirations framework, or anything else. The poll is anonymous, so please share, openly whatever comes to your mind. We see our model of the world, not the world itself. Great. Yesterday, we had also Module 2 for Cohort 1, and it was exactly the first question that, the first answer that emerged. Anything else? Yes, the AAA plus framework has to be in connection and match in scope. Maybe one more answer before we go to question number 2. Okay, I suggest we move on. The second question is, what are the major open questions you have after module 1? So if something remained unanswered, or you have some open questions or several questions or one question, please feel free to share. Why is state the positive? Maybe we would need some more clarification around this answer. Not sure if it's understood by everyone. Yeah, now that we know that the world is our own perspective and model, can we shift what we see and how we see it? What are concrete implementation steps? Is there a methodology? How can I shift my personal vision by using the AAA plus framework? Thank you, colleagues. And just to mention, if you have any other, questions that are emerging throughout today's session, please feel free to, add them as they appear, as they come to you in the chat box, or as Ben as well mentioned already in module 1, just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. The idea here is that it's an interactive session. It's not an event. It's not a high panel event. It's more of a workshop type of event. So yes, just feel free to jump in whenever you want. And with this, and mindful that we have a packed agenda, over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Alexandra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. As usual, I'm delighted to be with you. Just to answer a couple of things on the or to respond, not answer necessarily, on the Menti question number 2 specifically. Why is state plus? Well, I mean that's what we're going to be discussing today. So hopefully by the end of today that will be clearer. Can we shift our model? And can I shift the personal vision? I hope we'll be discussing this partly today, right? And also next week. But we don't have one, but it's kind of everywhere today. But I think that we'll see that state is very, 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 very critical as to how we think about this whole thing. And concrete implementation steps. I mean, we've got 6 hours together overall in 3 sessions. This is a very short time compared to the whole thing. So this really is about mindset change, and hopefully even by participating in this workshop, mindset will already be changing, right? I mean, it's not just mindset change happens sometime in the future, but hopefully some of the ideas already lead you to reflect. You might not agree with me, or you agree with me, that's fine, to actually update mindset. But I think we'd need longer to get into an implementation plan. It's a much bigger issue there. As Alexander said, it's going to be hopefully quite a lot more participatory this week, and it's mainly based around exercises. But I do just want to frame a little bit what we're going to be doing. And for those who didn't make it last week, just a very, very, very brief recap. And remember, just jump in. It's not formal. Got any questions, comments, just shout. Yeah. Your chance to leave and save yourself 2 hours, just to remind people that this workshop is not about innovation around technical areas, around, I don't know, gender or integrated landscape management, nor is it around, I don't know, a formalized idea of process of innovation, such as design thinking. If you're expecting that, they would all be good workshops to attend, but it's just not this one. So save yourself some time and frustration if that's what you're expecting, because this is not that workshop. Here we're talking about mindset, and mindset in itself is a whole issue as to how we define it. But we're essentially talking more about the way we think and feel, rather than technical aspects. I won't be offended if you disappear, all right? I mean, I'd be delighted for you. Innovation. This man, Thomas Edison, invented the light bulb, gramophone player. I think he has like more than 2,000 patents in the US. And he basically invented the modern research and design, research and development process of modern industry. I mean, it wasn't just that he came up with lots of ideas himself. And he says innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The man of science, the rigorous innovation happens like this, step by step by step. Doesn't sound a lot of fun, huh? All right. But the good news is that he was also a pretty good self-publicist, right? And it's not entirely true what he says, right? And so hopefully it will be a little bit more interesting this session than 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. Have a look at this statue of him where he shared a winter estate with Henry Ford in Florida, right? They were that close, the Ford motor car industrialized process, industrial production line, and Edison as innovation as a process. It was really hand in hand. In his right hand, he's got a cane, walking stick. He's an old man here. What's he got in his left hand? Anybody know this? He's got a metal ball, right? Which is kind of a bit strange, right? You think, I guess you couldn't really hold a light bulb or a gramophone record, but anyway. And the point is that he used this metal ball as part of his state change. And he used state change for his innovation. And what exactly that means and how that happened, we're going to come back to towards the end of this session. All right, but just bear this in mind, right? So this isn't quite true. Just by the way, does anybody know what this is? Just no. Okay, but we'll come back to this. A brief recap on last week. So this is what we're talking about. Here's the framework that you've got this agency, your sense of self, your sense of your capacity to do things and bring about change. It's not about your actual objective capacity, right? The constraints you have external. It's about your sense of agency. Some people have a strong sense of agency that they can do things, that they can They might be in the same situation as somebody else, but some people have this sense of that they have influence. Aspirations, what you're going for, what you're actually trying to achieve, and the adaptability, whereas this is either the learning or the action, changing your model or changing the world for those who were part of us. And as somebody rightly pointed out, that all of these affect each other. If you have a low sense of agency and you think you can't do anything, you're not going to have a high aspiration. If you have very high aspirations and you're useless at actually learning or doing something, you're going to be living in a dream world, right? This is completely integrated, but they can't be entirely the same, because then you have equilibrium or stasis, or there's no energy in the system. All right, so they need to be a little bit out there, but they also need to be kind of mapped together. And this is the key thing here we're talking about today, the internal state. Right, and we'll come to what this is. And I call it the plus because I think this is really key. It's really, really, really central to the whole thing. So this is where the energy or lack of it actually exists within. This is where the life exists within, the living being exists within this framework, right? And internal state, as we'll see, it's particularly related to agency, but not only. Right? So module 1, we looked at the framework. Module 2, we're talking about the internal state. And module 3, we're talking about more about how we can use the framework, the 3 A's. All right, because here we're talking about this plus. We're focusing almost exclusively on internal state today. So it's the least obvious of the 3 things, but perhaps the most important, in my opinion. But it's very related to agency, as we'll see. And this is what we're doing today. Highly ambitious. We won't do 7 to 10 tools. When I did this yesterday, I think I managed 6. But there's a number of tools about changing your state. And it doesn't matter if you remember them all. Some of the tools will land with you and you'll go, and it'll speak to you as a person. Other tools you'll go, huh, what the hell is that? That's fine. You don't have to take from this what is relevant to you. There's no one way of doing any of this stuff. What resonates with you is what's important. Very briefly, this is a central point. We don't experience the world as is, or see the world as is. We experience our model of the world, right? And it seems so counterintuitive. Of course, we see the world as it is. We can't, right? It's beyond our sensory data, right? It's hidden from us in some ways, and we make sense of it through our sensory data. But our internal models just aren't about tennis balls and hitting the racket. They're also about our sense of our internal models are hierarchical. Remember, they include our deep-seated beliefs about agency, what we value, how we can interact with the world. So our models are very comprehensive. And I know for some of you who didn't make it for last week, you might be going, "What's this all about?" But I think Alexandra has sent the link to the first module if you're interested in reading it. The basic point is that prior beliefs are deep expectations about gravity, about our values, about whether God exists or not, or whether people are nice or people are not nice, whether humans are essentially good or evil, or whether people like me, or whether good things happen, or whatever. We have deep prior beliefs and expectations about the world, which result in immediate sensory predictions. And in a sense, this is all we have. This is all we are, right? We are our prior beliefs and expectations, right? We are nothing else apart from that. Right? So it's not just mental, it's about the whole living organism, as we'll see. sensory data comes in from the world. You know, we see what we expect to see, right? Our model gets confirmed. It's great. It makes us feel good and we feel coherent, but all it is the model gets reinforced. We can't learn or change when our model is simply being reinforced, right? Which is fine. We don't always need to learn and change. Sometimes our model's good. But other times we predict something. We predict that I don't know. We predict that our colleague will say, this is a stupid example maybe. We predict our colleague will say hello and they don't. We've got a prediction error. There's an opportunity to learn about why they didn't, or to act in some way. So, because the basic point of this model is that all brains operate to minimize their uncertainty or surprise between their pre-existing model of the world and the world itself. In other words, this here is the only space when there's a prediction error for learning or new action, i.e. innovation, to occur. That's not saying that all uncertainty is good, right? We don't want the uncertainty of war. You don't want the uncertainty of extreme poverty. You don't want, but it is saying that how we approach uncertainty, which is going to happen anyway, is key. Right? But it's not saying that therefore uncertainty is good, although in certain cases it is good, as we'll see, because that involves getting out of your comfort zone. Right? But there's two faces of uncertainty. Right? Uncertainty can be horrible: fear, stress, draining, defensive. I don't want the uncertainty. I want certainty. But it can also be energizing, full of curiosity, right? And certainty is something where you're leaning into it, right? And essentially, if you're seeing the world as an open system, right, with unknowns and everything is unknown at this stage, then you're more likely to approach the world with curiosity. But if you're looking for clear answers to everything, right, and certainty, you're more likely to be in this situation. And also, if you're stressed, you're much more likely to look for clear answers to everything, right, and be less open to uncertainty. So we're already touching on what we mean by state. And what we're saying is, we will get to an exercise pretty quickly. We're not talking about positive thinking. Oh, the world is great and I've just got to wake up every day and be grateful and whatever. If you do that, that's fantastic, great. But we're not coming up with some superficial, just say, always think positive, right? I mean, shit happens, right? Nasty things happen. And so what we are talking about, though, is that if you're in a resourceful state, right, rather than unresourceful state, that's generally going to be a good thing. All right, where you can bring the sense of creativity and resourcefulness to situations rather than that fear and anxiety. The state is like the total configuration of within the boundaries of your skin of psychological and physiological, the total state of the organism. And we often feel it. Oh, that's how we know what state we are, and it's a feeling. Right? We feel joy, or we feel fear. Right? It's not just an emotion, it's something more than that. We feel our overall state. Right? And we're always in a state. It's not just some magical thing. We're always in a state. But because we're used to our state, we don't always notice it. And yeah, we are going to get to exercise just a minute. And there are many types of state, but just a couple of key parameters here is that you have generally high arousal, high energy, or low arousal, negative, and positive, unpleasant and pleasant, right? Anger, high arousal, but it's kind of unpleasant. Depression, downward, when you're feeling down, it's low arousal and it's negative. High, positive, pleasant, joy, etc. Right? Positive, pleasant, but low arousal when you're more reflective in whatever practice you might do. And it's not saying that any of these states are necessarily better than the others, but they're contextual. The one state which is probably never very useful to be in is which? There's one of these four where you kind of like, it's hard to say that you would ever want to be in that. High negative? Possibly, although anger is a great motivator for action, right? If you want action, then you know, within political action, right, you either have to create anger or a positive vision, right? Enthusiasm in a sense, right? So I would agree it's not a pleasant thing to be in, but there can be times. But I can hardly ever imagine that I can hardly, yeah, unpleasant, low arousal. This is, you know, you might want to mourn if you got something for a short period of time, but this is a bad place to be. All right. It's a state of, you know, you have a fight and flight. This is kind of called freeze. All right. It's not a good thing. And you also have states which are essentially forward looking and backward looking, and also internally focused and externally focused. But these are the kind of like the key things. But generally, we're looking about being here, right? That's generally what we're looking at. But there's things in between. But look, we're not all going to be standing up and being joyful in this workshop, right? We can't do that. If we were meeting in person, we could maybe, right? So we're going to be kind of focusing on states which are sort of here, all right? That more pleasant but you know, we're not going to be jumping around. Last thing to say here on this is it's an endless dance between self-management and external environment, right? You know, people in all cultures, a lot or most cultures, they have some kind of everything from psychedelics to dancing to coffee to whatever, self-management, listening to music, right? Whatever. We're always trying to manage ourselves and the external environment. Right, that affects it. It's naive to say that the external environment doesn't affect our internal state, and it's also, I think, very naive to say that we don't have any control as to how we respond to the external environment. And indeed, one could argue, not just one could, I would argue, that self-management of state is actually your highest form of agency, right? Agency isn't just about what you do, but it's about about having that sense that you can control your thoughts as well and your mental processes, and they're not just something which happen to you, but you're the instigator of those things. Unleashing your natural genius, the first thing. I like this one. I mean, who wouldn't want to unleash their natural genius? Anybody wouldn't? No? Okay. Who remembers this? Do you remember this at school? You used to have something like this, right? Where you had to you had to calculate the trajectory of some object about the angle and the velocity and all of this stuff, right? And then the forces from gravity and where it would come. We used to have a cannonball. It was always, for some reason, I guess it was war, I don't know, I don't know, people like war or whatever, but we'd always show a cannonball, right? And you'd have to do that. Do you remember this? You had this, right? Anybody could still do this? Any maths genius here? You're all hiding behind your camera, so you can be shy here. Look, probably with a bit of practice, we might be able to get somewhere. All right. But you might not be able to do the physics, all right, or the maths. But you can do something else. So imagine this was something of a tennis ball. And you were calculating the trajectory of a tennis ball. You might not be able to do that, but you can do something far, far, far more impressive. Or maybe not. Maybe you don't think it is more impressive. If somebody throws a tennis ball, somehow you can move flesh and blood just through thinking, running somewhere, holding your hands, gauging the wind blowing and the effect on the trajectory of the tennis ball. Hold your hands out and catch the ball. What's more impressive, being able to do that or being able to calculate the trajectory, the maths? Seriously, think about it. What's more impressive? Please.
Well, I guess it depends. For someone that is very used to mathematics, it will be more impressive not calculating, but do it like in person and other sides. So it depends on where you're more comfortable with, what will impress you, I will say.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And for me, I can actually, I'm going to be the counterbalance here. I can't do the maths. I can catch the ball. And I'm much more impressed by the fact I can catch the ball. In fact, billions of times more impressed. Not just a little bit, as in it's a triumph of nature, right? Of who we are, that we can do this stuff automatically without us even being remotely aware of it. And it's so natural for us, we forget how remarkable it is. We can what? We can somehow, through thoughts, we can move flesh and blood and bones at a certain speed in a certain area and calculate trajectory and catch a ball. I mean, that is astonishing, huh? And it's like, so we're not just being able to do the maths, we're actually embodied physicists. We can actually do physics in the real world and move flesh and blood. It's astonishing, and yet we take it for granted. What else can you do that you don't know how you do it? Because you don't really know how you move, right? You don't really have access to the process as to what goes on with intention and where your body starts moving. It's all automatic. What else can you do? You can
breathe.
Breathe. Remember to breathe. Millions, I don't know how many tens of millions of times throughout your life. Automatically. It all happens without you even being aware of it, or the part which does the maths.
Or
pumping your heart.
Or heart pumping. Yes, exactly.
Yep. Just imagine you can do even something weirder. You can extract energy from food from your stomach and turn that energy into the thoughts which allow you to run and catch the tennis ball. I mean, that's weird stuff, huh? You can transfer energy from your stomach into metabolic processes which allow you to catch a tennis ball. It's pretty weird stuff, huh? You dream every night for 2, 3, 4 hours, 2 or 3 hours every night. You go into hallucinations, make up stories, resolve your actually, you know, there's theories that you're just updating your mental model in your dreams. You do all of these things and then you forget about it. You don't know how you do that. The point is that there's so much going on within us. You don't know how you grow your toenails, but you can do it. The point here is really not to think of yourself purely as just Ben or Alexandra, right? In this way, as a with your identity and your job and whether you got family or not, and whether you like spinach or don't like spinach or whatever, this very narrow identity. But actually, we're biological living organisms. And 99.9% of stuff that we do, we don't even know how we can do it. We don't have conscious access to the underlying mechanisms. It's part of our biology, right? You really, and if you're focusing just on, you know, identity, all important stuff, logic, etc. It's important, really important, but it's not all we are. And so I'm going to refer to you, and don't be offended, not as people, but as biological living organisms. Right? Meaning everything within the boundaries of your skin. None of this, in my opinion, nonsense between mind-body connection. For mind and body to be connected, they have to be separate. Right? In the first place, for two things to be connected. It's all part of you, the biological living organism. And once we think of ourselves as a biological living organism, rather than just evaluating ourselves on the scale of can we do those maths, are we good at this skill, or are we not good at this skill, we take on a whole new appreciation of our abilities, right? And that in itself is something of a change of mindset for many people. Right? In itself, it's not then how can you use this, it's in itself. And to think of yourself, I think of, you know, not just as Ben, but as you, the living organism. Right? And then it becomes much more. Any comments, questions? Does that make sense? Does that, you're like, yeah, so what? Yeah, or like, no, actually this is yeah, this is the right way to think about ourselves. Okay, or one way, as I'm sure there are other ways. We're rich, we've got lots of resources, and we tend to think that we only have these resources in a certain narrow field, technical resources, what we think we're capable of. Our resources go a lot deeper than that, and it's good to use them. Okay, moving on. Next thing, so that was the first thing, your natural genius. It's about nature, right? And I see it as very much as, I know UNDP has this nature pledge. I mean, for me, I think our biology is, understanding our biology is, it's more with ourselves within the context of biology is key, but not everybody does, right? Now, one of the key things is a fundamental aspect of innovation is we're talking about new and different rather than old and the same. And we're not saying that new and different is always better than old and the same, but old and the same isn't innovation, right? So I'm not saying new and different is better. It's just that's where innovation happens, not there by definition. Right? And that's kind of what we're in search of in this workshop. So we're talking about innovation mindset. So a mindset which is more comfortable with the new and different rather than old and the same. And we talked about this in terms of the exploitative v explorative model. All right. And this also comes from animal foraging. Do you search for food in your existing territory, or do you explore new territory? Right? Exploitative or explorative? Are you exploiting what you already know or exploring what you don't know? Both are critical. Both are critical, but we're talking about this here in this workshop. And a key driver is curiosity, right? Seeing the world as an open place, basically being curious about how something works, asking questions of the world without attachment to any preconceived answer. You don't have an attachment to curiosity. It means not having an attachment to the answer, right? It's not curious if you're just looking for evidence to support your view, right? And this lady here, Ellen Langer, I don't know who, if any of you have come across her. She was the first like tenured female professor of psychology at Harvard. She's written a lot about In Search of the New and Different. And her latest book, The Mindful Body, it's a terrible title. It's about much more than the mindful body. It's about whole philosophies of life. I would highly recommend this. This book. It's all about curiosity as a basic state. She's controversial, right? Not everybody likes everything, and I must admit, when I read her stuff, I love her stuff, but there's once or twice I'm like, really? Right? But that's okay. But her basic approach I dig a lot, and I think most people who read it do, right? But again, not everything necessarily. So how do we do it? How do we look for the search of the new and different? Sounds great, huh? How can we do this? Isn't this a big sort of like philosophical lifelong task? Well, there's a very, very, very simple technique. And if anybody's able to turn their cameras on, it would be great. I understand you might not be able to, but if anybody else is able to turn their camera on, it would be appreciated, because it makes it, well, by me at least, because it makes it so much easier to engage. But I do realize that some of you have internet problems, or maybe you're doing something else. Hi, Ivan. Thank you very much for heeding the call, stepping up to the plate, whatever. I don't know. Thank you. Appreciated. I realize not everybody can, but it just makes it, we're humans, not bots. Right? Now, the new and different. How do we look for the new and different as a way of life? It's hard work, right? If we're just going, oh, I've got to learn something new about the world and seek out new and different things, right? That takes a lot of energy in remembering it. But there's a much, much, much simpler way of doing it, right? Because here we're talking about state change. So what we're trying to do is, we're not talking about just cognitive thinking. We're talking about the whole living organism. How can we get the whole living organism to just look for what's new and different and observe what's new and different in the world? Please.
Maybe through a new experience, like through concrete experience.
Absolutely. We can travel, we can go, we can have new types of food, we can whatever, meet new people, etc., etc. Unfortunately, we can't always be doing that stuff. Life has a lot of less interesting and less exciting stuff along the way. So here's a way of doing it in those in-between meeting moments. All right. I would just like you to look around your room very slowly, or not very slowly, but not like this, but just look around your room and notice new things that you've never seen before. Doesn't matter what. It could be a color in a picture. It could be a little hole on your wallpaper or something. It could be the pattern of tiles or carpet on your floor. Just really pay attention to small details that you've never noticed before. It's not important what. It doesn't have to be big insights. It's just the act of paying attention to what you don't normally notice. Did anybody find stuff that they hadn't noticed before? Probably billions of things, huh? Look at the back of your hand. Seen that tens of thousands of times, probably. Just notice some lines you've never noticed before. Unfortunately, I found only bad things, like, oh, I have to clean this. There you go, uncertainty. It opened you up for possibility of innovation in your life, where you actually clean the room, right? Possibility for action. No, I'm kidding. But it's like, it's not even about the meaning you give to it. It's just the act of noticing new and different stuff that you don't pay attention to. It puts your brain into a state of saying, huh, this is not about my mental model now, or my model. It's about looking at the world. And the world has lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of signals and data which I'm not paying attention to. Right? On a day-to-day basis. You don't have to wait until you're traveling or having a nice meal. And what this does is, it's not about what you notice, it's about putting your brain in the state of noticing. Because once you do that, it changes everything. Right? And you'll notice that if you, for example, you have a meetings with a colleague or kids or somebody who it always goes round in circles. You know how it is with family. You have a meeting and everybody behaves in exactly the same way. Right? And you have the same discussion again and again and again and again and again. We all have that. The brain is not looking for, it's on autopilot. It's on its model. This person behaves like this. This is what I predict, and it's just on this autopilot. And if you're looking, and you just do this, looking for what's new and different, 2 or 3 minutes before you go into a meeting with somebody like that, your brain will be in that state of looking for new information. And once it's looking for new information, it's just more in the present moment, right? It's more present there and then, and it won't be on autopilot. Okay. And you can use this, when you walk home at night, you probably, or in the afternoon, you've walked home into your apartment or house many, many times, and you probably know the way, right, very well. If you notice thousands of new things in your room, imagine how many new things there are outside, right? Just in these familiar walks. And it's not about using this as a means to an end, right? Oh, what do I get out of doing this? It's actually, it's kind of like, it's a very relaxing way of looking at the world in an open way, right? And noticing things from the world. It's not about as a means to an end. It's kind of a way of it's a way of acting. So I tell you, if I recommend, if you spend just 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the afternoon, right? If you're not feeling you're not feeling connected to where you are at the moment, spend 2 or 3 minutes just looking around your room and at these things. It will bring you into a much more kind of like immediate situation and a much more open thing, and create that kind of space where innovation and that mindset and inner state is more possible. Okay. Also looking within, not only around. Absolutely. You can look within, not only around. It's about notice. And this is what Ellen Langer talks about. It's like, it's noticing what's different about the situation, because if everything changes, it's like, even if you're in pain, you've got a really bad pain for something, or in a bad situation, it's never exactly the same at every single time of the day. right? Or if you're unhappy, you're never always exactly unhappy in exactly the same way at exactly the same time. Right? There's always some notes, there's always some changes along the way. And by noticing the changes, i.e. the uncertainty, the prediction error, that's where you get the scope for agency and seeing things differently. That's what we also do in yoga and meditation practices. Yeah. So yeah. There are different forms, huh? But yeah. And here and it's interesting you talk about yoga or meditation. I mean, I don't really do. I don't do a formal meditation practice or yoga or anything. For me, these kind of like these techniques are more my kind of way of doing things. It's a sort of like slight kind of mindfulness sort of approach, but without a formal kind of practice. Blue sky thinking, number 3. Let's move on, and then we'll take a break after this one. This is really important. Remember, we talked about this here, about generative, that we're trying to get into this generative state. Blue sky thinking. Let's look at this. I guess some of you are familiar with this basic concept, right, of lantern v spotlight attention. Kids tend to have this. They're looking around in the world, right, exploring all that new stuff. Adults tend to be more narrow, focused, task-oriented, right? It's because we've learned what works. And it's literally physical connections in our brains get strengthened as things get repeated, right? As many of you know the phrase, neurons which fire together wire together, right? And so our spotlight becomes, and our attention becomes much more focused as adults than as kids. Not always. And generally, this is narrow focused, task oriented, right? And this is more broad, strategic, and contextual. And these are actual physical part. This is not just psychology. These are physically in terms of our brains, right? And for our purposes here, we're looking more at this, right? This is really important to get things done, right? And the point is not to say one is better than the other, right? It's not saying that. This is really important. I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's about having the capacity to move between the two according to the situation. So most people are better either at that or at that, right? And this is about the flexibility. But let's locate this. Remember, we talked about using biology, our biological processes, and hacking into them because our biology is not so different to our cognition, right? Remember, we talked about that, hopefully. If you see a pigeon, and I've experimented with this, I've done this myself, I've watched it, and it's normally true, not in every case. If you see a pigeon pecking at corn on the floor, it's going like this, right? And then it stops and looks up. All right, so this is task oriented, and it stops and looks up, and it looks around. Of course it has to, right? To survive in the world, all living organisms have to have the mechanisms to be both task oriented and to be aware of their contextual, their context, right? And it's a biological feature. It's not just a cognitive thing, right? Trees have it. They'll be aware of sort of like they can find sunlight direction, but also aware of seasons, right? Or longer term things, right? All of us have this. And pigeons are, and this is very much based on the work of Ian McGilchrist, who many of you are probably familiar with the left-right hand side of the brain, the idea that the left is more rational and the right is more creative. Right? It's a popular myth. It's not. I mean, there's some aspects of this, but it's kind of like one of those pop psychology myths. What McGilchrist has shown is that and he's written extensively on this stuff. Very interesting. Is that actually the right side of the brain isn't just about creativity, but it's more about being aware of context, bigger picture. All right, it's this. Whereas the left does language and more task-oriented things. Pigeons do pick corn, but we write emails. That's task-oriented. Right? But it's the same. It's the same thing. And so what we have is this dichotomy. It's not always black and white, but we're trying to make it clear. Big picture, tunnel vision. Narrow, broad. Right? And what I'm saying is that there's a physiology behind this. It's not just a psychological thing. Oh, am I a strategic thinker? Right? If we tap into our physiology, we can actually create some of the conditions which help us be more innovative. And yeah, Alison Gopnik, she talks about this a lot, that babies and young kids are more broad picture. And there was one study, and I cannot find it again, unfortunately. If anybody knows it, please send me a link, because it was excellent, where they had adults and children were playing some video game. And adults were better at the video game than the kids, because the kids, their attention was wandering, right? And the adults were much better. But then they changed the rules halfway through the game without telling anybody, right? Guess what? The adults didn't notice, and they just kept on playing their rules, right? According to the old rules. But it was the kids who were looking around who noticed the changes, right? It's a very interesting thing. It's a physical process. And essentially, our eyes are really important about this, and how we use our eyes can help us change our state. Remember, because we talked about this in module 1 about our cognitive processes often are just our cognitive processes are really just kind of like tapping into our underlying biological processes. How do we do this? So if you're all over the place, right, you're over that and you want to focus on a point. Let's try it. Just stare at a spot on the wall in front of you. Don't move, just really intently stare at it. Don't think, just put all your attention on one little spot on the wall. And you'll notice your attention goes narrow and focused. You become less aware of the world out there. And so you can use this technique quite easily. You can actually just stare at a spot on the wall, and let's say you've got a report you don't want to do, right? Get everything ready, stare at a spot on the wall, and just bring the state with you and just start working, right? Because it's not about what you're focusing on, it's the state of focus. We confuse the two things, think it's all about what we're focusing on. It's not. It's about, is your brain in a state of focus, right? The peripheral vision, right? This is something, when you focus, just try focusing on the wall again. And as you focus on the wall, just become aware of stuff to the side, while keeping your head still and your eyes still. And to become aware of the stuff on your side, you have to look, your eyes have to relax. Right? And you're already going into that more contextual state. But here's the ultimate way of doing this. When I say the ultimate way, it's a bit of an exaggeration. An important practical way of doing it, of getting this relaxed strategic state. If you've got a window nearby you, I'd invite you just to look out of your window and stare at the sky, at the horizon, not at a tree or a building, but at the sky. And just don't move your eyes, just keep your eyes focused on the sky far away from you. And as you do this, just keep on looking, and you'll notice that your eyes start relaxing. And you start relaxing as you focus on the sky. It's subtle. It's a subtle thing. Just notice how you just start relaxing and your eyes relax as they can't focus on something clear, near. And this is already getting you into that more broader, kind of more relaxed state. All right, again, it's subtle. And this is a much more generative state in terms of creativity than this narrow stuff that we all do when we're focusing on Zoom. Right? And I would, and actually, if there was almost one piece of recommendation from this whole workshop, this module, I would say spend a couple of minutes every morning, 5 minutes you can, just looking at the sky, right, and not moving around, but just staring at the sky, and you really start to notice how your state can change quite quickly. And you can also do this. Alexandra was telling me just before we started this meeting, she had been on Zoom calls, I think continuously since 12. All right, today. It's a disaster, right? Because you're in this narrow state and you're not going to be creative or tipped, or you know, it might be creative in a certain way when you're in this narrow thing, right? And you can't really focus on this stuff. Take a break in Zoom and stuff when you're between meetings, whatever. Stare at the sky for 2 minutes. It really just kind of like puts your brain in a different state. Or look for new and different things for a couple of minutes just to get off autopilot. Yeah, Ivan, please.
Yes, I used to practice this every day and several times per day, but I have observed different results. I mean, in terms of my inner feelings, if the sky is blue or is gray.
Right.
And probably this is something that is related with my childhood. I don't know, because I used to practice this with my father. I used to go to the mountain to see the sky and understand the constellation during dark nights. That was a usual practice. But for me, the gray days, when the rainy season, I live in Honduras, and when the rainy season is really strong, so I suffer a lot because I cannot see the blue sky. And that has a not nice impact on my feeling. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I makes sense. A couple of things. Yeah. Even first, thanks for sharing that. And as I say, with these practices, some will work for some and not for others, right? My one question is, when you look at the sky, when you did that with your dad, this is a question, it's not a comment, right? Did you move around or were you looking at one point?
What I used to do is to look at clouds, and normally clouds move my eyes following them and trying to look how the shapes change and all the things.
Right.
I like to also to see the contrast between colors. That's why I practice this in different moments during the day, because normally when it's afternoon, so I can appreciate the tonalities of the sky. So I like to do that. Probably I suffer when I cannot see that.
Look, people responded to everything in different ways. I mean, like, it's and I'm not trying to suggest all of these practices are just right for everyone. I mean, it's like, for example, there's this everybody would say, you look at spend time in nature and it's regenerative and people, whatever, it's a positive thing. I was in a workshop many years ago when somebody, the facilitator, showed this picture of, you know, beautiful countryside and flowing rivers, right? And, you know, how does it make you feel? And the right answer was relaxed, you know, peace and whatever. And there was a couple of people, I can't remember from where, I mean, from which country, but they were both African countries. They were like poverty, loneliness, right? So people associate different things with different stuff, and we should never make assumptions as to how people associate it. But anyway, that's one thing. Just very briefly, we need to take a break. There's another way of doing peripheral vision, though, is literally is looking at at a point in the wall, holding your hands out like this, and just becoming aware of your hands, holding them up a bit higher than that, and just becoming a bit aware of the stuff without moving your hands to it, just being able to focus on both of your hands to the side, which are at the corner of your vision. It's the same thing. It's we have very narrow focus in our eyes. You know, it's a similar thing. But with this, I suggest we take a break because we've got a lot to get on to, if that's okay. I'm not trying to cut down the conversation. Let's just take a break, if that's okay. Yeah. So we're back in 5 minutes. Okay, thanks.
And please stay on Zoom during the break.
If there are any comments, is there any questions or comments or anything? I'm going to carry on then in this case. Do jump in, but the reason I'm going quite quickly is there are still a couple of tools to to share, and the most important thing isn't if you remember everything, but just what strikes you as potentially useful. Carrying on this theme of using or hacking into our biology, right, to change our state. We think of changing perspectives, listening to other points of view, right, understanding different perspectives as purely a cognitive thing, right? It's an intellectual thing. It's like it's an effort. And that's true in many ways. But if you think about it, the notion of changing perspectives is also deeply built into nature, right? I mean, you know, if you're hunting something, right, you're going to be able to want to look at things in different ways. If you're trying to understand what something is, you might be looking at it from different perspectives. And essentially, our brains are always asking the ventral and dorsal systems, what is it and where is it? And where is it in relation to me? Right? This is the fundamental things that our brains are doing, dorsal and ventral system, what and where, right? In a sense, that's perspectives, right? Where is it in relation to me, right? And if we're moving in a physical world, our perspectives are always changing. And we can use this to think about our creativity. I want to do a little exercise with you. Now, imagine this is sort of like turned around and you were facing this. So you were facing this part, right? If I just drew it, you know, this is two-dimensional. If I just drew it in a three-dimensional world, you would just see a line. You get what I mean? So imagine you're facing this. All right. And I want to show you a few different perspectives to look at it from. I just want you to notice a little bit not just the perspectives, but how it makes you react and how it makes you feel. Okay, we ready? Look at it from this perspective. And now from this perspective. Now from this perspective. from this perspective, from this perspective, and from this perspective, from this perspective. And now from this perspective. And this perspective. From this perspective. And from that perspective. Up from that perspective. This perspective. And this perspective. And this perspective. What happens? Anything, you notice anything? Please, Andrea.
I don't know, but at first I felt almost like a wall that I was climbing, and then I could see the view from above it, and then it just became a fun little structure in the middle of like a field. That's what I imagined. But after a while changing perspectives, it was a little bit confusing and fast.
It's weird, isn't it? It's odd
Yeah.
how just looking at these shapes and from a physical perspective on a line, and I didn't describe what this thing was. I didn't say what it is. Some of you might have seen it as a hill. Some of you might have seen it as a line. Right? I didn't, you know, it was completely your imagination. And just in your perspective, as you say, Andrea, it's like it changes. You feel it. Yeah. Oh, I feel this makes me feel free, or this feels intimidating, or oh, I don't know about this perspective, what to think. Right?
It was crazy because I imagined the outside was out in the sun, but the inside was felt cold. I could even feel like when
Ah,
you said the
wow.
perspective from inside, it felt cold to
Wow.
me from the.
Wow. That's fun. That's great. And the point of this is that through is your brain is being forced to look at something, not just a line like this from different perspectives. And it's literally it's getting more creative here. All right. And if you've got something and you can do this, it doesn't have to be around a specific issue. You can you can get a piece of paper and just draw a line like this and do 50 arrows in different directions and do it yourself before you go into a meeting where you have to be a bit more creative, and it will just get your brain into looking at the world in different ways. All right, and remember we're talking about state here. All right, you can really use this because it's not about what you're thinking about, it's about the state of your brain looking at things in different ways. All right. I'm going to move on if that's okay, because we've still got a few more things thanks for sharing that, to do this. And do jump in if anybody's got any comments or questions or whatever, right? So now I'm going through. Using your own internal search engine. In a sense, if you think about it, our brain is always interrogating the world. That's what we're doing. We're asking questions of the world. All right. Where's this? What is it? How's this thing going to react? We have hypotheses and we're asking questions of the world. Right. And the questions that you ask, and your brain are giving answers. And the questions that you ask are critical to the answers you want to get. If I ask myself, why am I so bad at Spanish? All right. what's my brain going to do? It's going to list the reasons I'm bad at Spanish. You're stupid. You didn't do any work at school. You're worried about making grammatical errors in front of friends because you're too paranoid, whatever. It's going to come up with all of the reasons why I'm bad at Spanish. Right? And so when you ask, why am I, or what the cause is, often all you're doing is you're just reinforcing the problem and you're giving yourself the answers. Why am I bad at Spanish? Why does my hair look awful this morning? Why is the world an awful place? Whatever, right? You're asking your brain, you've used a Google question, and your brain is coming up with these answers. If you never ask, why am I, or very rarely, but you start asking these questions of the world, a different question, what can I do to become better at Spanish? I've changed the question entirely. First of all, my brain is now looking for solutions. I've also told my brain that this situation is not fixed, it's changeable. Right? It's not that I am bad at Spanish, it's about a situation that if I act in it, this situation can change. We've got agency in there. Right? What can I do to make the world a better place? Right? As opposed to, well, so it's a silly example, but you know what I mean, right? What can I do to make a bigger contribution is a different question to why is the world in such a mess? Or maybe you don't think it is. It's an entirely different thing. And so with this, so asking the question in the right, in a positive, in a way which is going to lead you to giving you some agency in the situation is really important. And it would nearly always involve, what can I do? Right? If it starts with, what can I do to? And the thing is, we don't have time to go into it in much detail. But the thing is, you don't even have to answer the question. Just asking the question is often enough. You know how when you go to a party and you don't remember somebody's name, right? But you remember the next day, you remember you met this great guy, but you can't remember his name. And for the next 3 days, you're trying to remember what it is, and you can't remember. And suddenly you're, I don't know, eating your dinner or doing the washing up or whatever, cleaning the dishes. And it's like doing something completely different. It's, oh, Ivan, that was it. Yeah, we've all had that experience. You can't remember something, and then somebody comes. It's because, remember, your brain doesn't like uncertainty. It hasn't answered the question. And so your brain is still working on it at some level. Right? And if you're asking this question, and if you're asking, so what can I do to help make the world a better place? Maybe it's not a question of coming up with a practical 5-point answers. Maybe this is just a question for reflection, right? That you're wanting to ask yourself over and over again, and you don't need to come up with concrete answers. Sometimes you could just let the question settle, and your brain will still be working on it under the background because it doesn't like uncertainty, right? So it can be quite important to I've worked with many people where they're living in countries where the situation is pretty grim, and they want to ignore certain things because it's just too much to engage with certain issues. Often this is a helpful thing. What can I do to whatever to understand this more? And you don't have to answer it. You don't take the pressure on yourself. You just answer the question. You just let the question flow. Another thing, so this is quite important for agency, right? And it's very useful, this, and it's quite easy to do. Another one No, what's time? 2039. Yeah, this thing a little bit about not answering the questions, right? And about being open. How many colors in a rainbow? Well, I showed you there. 7. Yeah? Well, there used to be 5 until Isaac Newton came along. All right? And said there were 7 with his prisms, and 7 was a religious number. All right? Now we see 7. And apparently some cultures, I'm not sure if this is actually true or not. I've tried to verify it, but I can't. See 4, some Chinese cultures. And actually there are no colors in a rainbow. It's a spectrum, right? So this is a construction. So even something as physical as we think is a construction, right? And we take it for granted. Color, human vision, we have 3, right, receptors. Birds have 4, so they see much more varied colors than humans. Dogs have 2. So even these physical things that we think of, which we're so sure about, the world is not as certain as all of this. And it's all of our values and contexts and models that we're imposing on the world, which aren't there structurally in the world, right? Even from vision. And if you remember from session 1, from module 1, we talked about how we build models from perception, right? It's not that this is, oh, it's nice to know. We build our information about the world from the bottom up in many ways. So this is important. So it's about, so this looking for what I don't know, what I do know, is a really important way of just being open. And we don't have time to go into this. And this is actually called a Zeigarnik effect. This, very briefly, I'll tell the story very, very quickly. Right? There was a psychology university woman in Berlin, I think, in the 1920s, and she they used to go out for a meal on a Friday afternoon after work, and they would all go to this beer garden, and they would all order a meal. And they had this waiter who came along, who was, you know, an old guy, and he would remember exactly what everybody had every single time. You know, I had the sauerkraut, but don't give the tomatoes and whatever, a group of people. And he would always get it right, and he would never write it down, right? And they were like, because they were psychology university people, they were like, what's going on here? This is extraordinary. And they decided they'd do a little experiment on him. And so one time after he bought their meals, they put napkins over their, you know, serviettes over their plates and said, excuse me, sir, what did we have? And even though he'd given the meals like 30 seconds earlier, he couldn't do it. He didn't know. And they were like, what's going on here? And she dedicated her life to figuring this out. It's basically the brain doesn't like unfinished business. And once he had served the food, he'd closed the loop. Yeah, he'd finished. The information was no longer needed. It's like when you study for an exam, you study, you do the exam, it's finished. Whereas if you keep the loop open and your brain is still working on it, it's looking for deeper answers. And so actually saying, what can I do to make the world a better place? If you answer the question, in many ways, you're just reinforcing what you already know, right? Whereas when you leave the answer open and you just ask the question, your brain will work on it, right? And you might get the answer tomorrow, 2 years, lifetime, never. And I've done this with books, right? I've sometimes, when I've had an excellent book, which I really love, I've done this with a couple of books, spend a year reading them. Because I know that if I just read it, as soon as I close it, it's kind of, I'm out of the adventure, right? Whereas if you're keeping something open, you're still there. Anyway, that's a little thing, the Zeigarnik effect. So about closing loops, and that's what happens with when you suddenly remember that it was Ivan I met at the party. All right. Two more things, giving yourself permission. All right, two more tools I want to just discuss, want to share. Do jump in if you have any questions. Giving yourself permission. This might seem obvious, but it's not. From the moment we're born to the moment we die, people are telling us or giving us suggestions as how we should react, how we should think, how we should feel, what we should do. All right. It's not always meant badly. That's culture, right? When we have shared understanding, then we can interact with each other, right? When we understand things in the same way. But our parents, from day one, are telling us how to behave, right? Our teachers at school, our friends, peer pressure, our colleagues at work, TV adverts, advertisers are telling us how we should, not just what we should do, but how we should think, how we should feel. We should feel good about this and not about that. Politicians, religious leaders, you name it, right? It's day in, day out. People are suggesting how we should behave, but not just how we should behave, but how we should actually react, right? And we all think that we're individuals, or many of us do, but actually in many ways we're sheep, right? We're just, we're just kind of, we think we're individuals, but we're just kind of like following what we've been told, right? And what everybody else does. And that's fine. As I say, culture's good. But it's problematic when we're looking at innovation, right? Remember, this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about life, we're talking about innovation mindset. And so in English, and I think in many other languages, in French and Spanish, in English, the word can has two meanings. It means you're able to, which means you have the skills, the ability to do it, right? I can hit the ball, right? I can write the report. And another meaning of can is allowed to. I'm allowed to. Permission, right? And in English, and also in other languages, these two meanings, they get confused, right? And when people say they can, they kind of mean put the two things together. And they're not the same. They're very, very different, right? So I can't apply for that job, all right? Often people, or whatever example, right? Or I can't get the meeting with the minister. Often people they're putting these two things, I'm not able to, and I don't give myself permission to do. In other words, I'm not allowed to. They put them together. They're two separate things. And I want us to be very clear that they can be separated as well. So here, I'm not talking about if you have the ability to, I'm talking about you, the living organism, everything within the boundaries of your skin are allowed to. You don't need to ask somebody else's permission. I want to say some sentences and just see how you react to them. You can, meaning you're allowed to. You don't have to ask anybody's permission. I'm not saying you can, that you have the ability, but you, the living organism, can have the best day of your life today. So nobody's stopping you in terms of your reaction. I'm not saying you can and you have the ability, but you don't need to ask anybody's permission to have the best day of your life today. You can find ways of having much more impact in terms of you're allowed to give yourself the permission to succeed. Right? You don't have to ask anybody's permission. You can, in other words, you have the permission, you can give yourself the permission to you, the living organism, let's say you don't like writing reports, but you are free to enjoy writing reports. Right? There's nobody stopping you. You, the living organism, you're free to have a fantastic day today. You're free to find energy and be in a resourceful state, even in not very pleasant situations. You are free to find even more positive ways of reacting to the world. So you might not know how to, but you are free to do it. You are free to feel more empowered. You are free to finally choose to act on that goal that you've been setting and putting aside. You are free to have better relationships with other people. In terms of you don't need to ask anybody's permission. So this is really about about separating this I am free to and I am able to, I can. And this is really important for innovation. Because in my experience of working with people, people's biggest problem with innovation is I'm not innovative, I'm not creative, I don't really trust myself to come up with new ideas which are any good, and it's everybody else who's doing this. Right? That's what I come across often is this sense of agency that I can't control this situation or that I need to ask permission. You are free to give yourself that permission. All right? You are free to dedicate your life to becoming even more effective, and you're free not to as well. All right? You are free to look for the new and different as a part of your everyday life. You don't need to ask anybody's permission, and you're free not to. Right? But we have much more choice in a lot of this stuff than we think. Okay. And so just, you can walk along and just say, I am free to. And again, it's not the same as I'm able to. All right. We're not going to have time for this, this asking an advisor, but I just want to say one thing is that this asking a 24/7 advisor, if any of you do any kind of like meditation practices or whatever, okay, Matthew does, right? Have a conversation with somebody in this. Ask them for advice. Use your imagination. Most people are scared of their imagination, particularly in Europe and America, Northern America. I found this is one of the things that my work particularly with FATS is that I found that people from Europe and America are much more scared of their imagination, right, than people from the Americas, Africa, and Asia, right? And have a conversation. Be surprised. Ask somebody, right? What what you can do. It's not childish, right? This is your imagination is your secret weapon. Use it, right? And it's not about that they actually communicate with you through the universe. It's just that our brains, they don't store information like on a computer desk, on a computer disk. Our information is distributed, right, and has all these associations and meanings and memories, right? And our memories, they kind of bring things together. And so if all of a sudden you've got Nelson Mandela appearing in your conversation about how can you have more impact, it's going to trigger a different state. right? And you're going to be able to look at things in different ways. It's not that he's sorry to disappoint you. He's not really there, right? But you have a in your world model, you have a view of Nelson Mandela or whoever, right? You have some, you've made it up, right? Your view of him, but you have a view of him or other people. And once you start associating this, it will change the way the options which are available to you. But we don't have time for that, unfortunately, to go this exercise. We could have done that. So I want to get to this one. So because this is really important. Your mum was right. Sleep on it. We think of sleep sometimes as a bit of a bore. We spend a third of our lives asleep. All right. Japanese women are the longest living people in the world. So she'll spend nearly 29 years asleep. Right? I mean, there's got to be, remember, we as biological living organisms, there's got to be an evolutionary benefit here, right? You don't like just sleep and make yourself vulnerable for a third of your life, right? There's something deep going on here, very deep, right? And we think, oh, well, it's time to go to bed. This is something fundamental about life, just sleeping. I was taught that when I was growing up, that our dreams were like a couple of minutes long. Right? Actually, it's now known that we spend up to 2 hours a night dreaming. Right? Hallucinations, unreality, things walk through walls, deep emotions kind of like get tested out. Right? 2 hours a night. Right? When we're not even aware of it, we don't remember it. And the modern theories within this predictive processing is that our models are testing themselves out. Right? So we're actually updating our models, our internal models of the world during dreaming. So she would have 63,500 dreams in her life. Right? And she'll dream for more than 7 years. It's pretty astonishing, right? And the thing is, when we're asleep and awake, we think that we just go from awake and then we fall asleep, right? It's a bit more complicated than that. We go through a transition phase where our biology, our chemicals, and our brains start changing. And you can see, and you can actually see this if you pay attention to it when you go to sleep. You can notice that that just before you go to sleep, right, it's not too difficult if you practice a little bit. You can notice that stuff starts getting a bit weird just before you fall asleep, right, as you start halving going to sleep. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, just I've read also that some artists were having naps and very, very short naps actually for their creativity that was connected to the sleeping cycles indeed. Yeah.
Let's come to that.
Okay.
This is exactly where we're going. Transition. This is called, you've got true transitions from awake to asleep and and asleep to awake. Sorry, it should be a transition here, right? This is called hypnagogia, when you're going asleep to awake to asleep, and this should be here from asleep to awake. It's called hypnopompia, and these are very creative states because your model is both transitioning from the world just to itself and vice versa. And this is why lots of people get, their best ideas are in the shower in the morning, right? It's because they're sort of like half in this state. But this from hypnagogia, this is what this man was doing with his silver ball. The man of science, right? Who didn't, it's all 99% perspiration, used to sit for up to 2 or 3 hours every day, right, in his lab with these metal balls in his hands, right, and would have plates underneath, and he was going like this, and then as he was falling asleep, just as he fell asleep, the balls would fall down on these metal plates, and he'd wake up and he'd write down what he was doing. right? So he was trying to take advantage of this state, and there's been some research done actually on this recently with maths problems, and people they solve maths problems which are given just before falling asleep. They can do it more because their brain starts loosening its model, right? And it starts getting a little bit more excitable. Now, I must admit, I was a bit skeptical of this. I thought it was kind of like a bit of an urban legend, right? So I contacted the Edison Foundation, and it is indeed true, right? That he did something like this, not necessarily exactly like this, but he definitely did, right? Salvador Dali did this with keys, all right? But there's a number of people who do this, and you can use this. And in dreams, there's loads of stuff which has come up through dreams where the brain switches off, right? Periodic table. Interesting, a lot of scientific insights. And it's not that these things get revealed in sleep and then they're correct. They still have to do the maths afterwards in the morning to test whether it's correct, right? These aren't like divine revelations. This is your brain trying to make sense of something in a different way, and you still have to test it, right? It doesn't mean it's objective. It's not like a prophecy, right? That's what people used to believe. Chemicals. I mean, again, it's interesting. All these scientific people, right? And they've been working on stuff for years, and therefore and then they suddenly come up with things. There's loads, and most of them are Europeans, right? And Americans, just because that's what's been studied and most well known. I can't tell you this one. The words of the song "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Keith Richards came up with that as well on this. You want to give it a go? We haven't got long, but why don't we just give it a go? Just try it. Yeah? You don't have to. Take a pic, we'll do this quite quickly, but just take a piece of paper, get a piece of paper near you, and just think of, you don't need to write it down just yet, but have it ready. Just think of an issue that you would like some more insights into. Think of something. Just bring it to mind. You don't have to write it down, so we don't want to spend too much time doing it. But just think of something. And if you need to go at 6 o'clock, I'm sorry, in 9 minutes or 8 minutes, don't worry. I will make sure the time is signaled, so you don't have to think about what's the time, right? Now I'd like you to think about this, and I'm going to ask you to close your eyes in a minute and sit back, and you can turn your cameras off if you want, because it can feel a bit odd. You got your eyes closed, and people can see you, and you can't see them. And I'm going to turn my camera off. Okay. But I was just going to ask you to just keep in mind that issue that you have thought about, that you want some more insights in. And just close your eyes and just allow yourself to relax, feeling your feet on the ground. And just notice which hand is feeling a bit heavier than the other one. You're imagining that you're staring at the blue sky. Your eyes are relaxed. And you're relaxed outside and you're relaxed inside. And nobody needs anything from you. And just bring to mind this issue or problem or challenge that you have. And just allow yourself to think about it in a new way, in a very relaxed way. And now going a bit deeper and deeper and relaxing even more. Thinking of people you love, your values, and you and your amazing abilities as a biological living organism with so much more than you normally think. And just think about that issue where you want some insights. Just allow yourself to see it in a new way, with some new perspectives. And you drift and float and feel like you're half about to sleep. And just think of this issue. That's a different perspective. As you think about this issue more and you just relax even more, just allow you, the whole living organism, to gain some insights into this issue and what you need to do. And drifting and floating. Now I just invite you to wake up, open your eyes quickly, and just write down anything which came to mind. Just get onto your pen and paper, just write down anything which you thought of. Okay, then you can just open, put your cameras back on if you can. And we did this very quickly, right? I mean, this was we did this in like 3 minutes, where it normally takes a little thing, but it was just about trying to give you a little bit of a taster, right, of that thing between sleep and awake. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just to share, maybe what was interesting for me, at least, it was like, so some ideas came up during the exercise, but that was not really clear. But I was trying not to, to grab any ideas or whatever. But when it comes to writing, it was extremely focused, actually, and like new ideas where, like, it was like really organization of all the foggy ideas I had. It was like coming back to life and differently.
Right. In that dreamy state, this is the whole point of what I was trying to do as well, is excuse my thing, it doesn't make sense, huh? Because it's all a bit kind of like weird and kind of off and trippy and whatever. And that's the whole point, is to send your brain out of this thing, but then there, yeah. And again, we did this in 3 minutes, I think. Right, but this is something a lot which if you're serious about creativity, along with this asking for advice from people, it's really quite a powerful thing. And this is stuff which is already in there. It's just you reorganizing what you already know and accessing it in different ways. And the key thing, I'm repeating myself, you're free to do this, and you're free to make use of this imagination. All right. I'm sorry, but we're at the end, and I'm going to hand over to Alexandra now. If anybody can stay for, or wants to stay for another 5 minutes after Alexandra's just officially closed it, for any questions or comments or to discuss anything, I can stay for a few minutes more after this. But I know some of you might have other appointments at the top of the hour. But otherwise, then do stay or Alexandra, please. And I'm sorry it was a bit rushed at the end.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us today. Thank you, Raquel, Rawan, Andrea, Ivan, Mathieu, for joining us for this second module. We still have one session to go next Wednesday, so we hope you will be able to join us. For those who won't be able, don't worry, we can share with you the recording afterwards, but we do hope to see you next Wednesday. Wishing you great rest of your afternoon, morning, depending where you're joining us from. And see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And if anybody has any questions, then please feel free to or suggestions or comments.
Thank
Please,
you.
please.
Thank you very much. I enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay.